What if the son of one of the world's most brilliant minds suddenly questioned everything he believed about life, purpose, and even God? Imagine being born into a family that the world watches at every turn, carrying a legacy so monumental it feels impossible to live up to. This is the story of Ethan Musk, the teenage son of Elon Musk, who shocked millions with a statement about God that nobody saw coming. The moment Ethan spoke out, it wasn't just his family who were caught off guard, the entire world paused to listen. What exactly did he say? Why did it blow minds and challenge long-held beliefs? This story is about more than just one statement. It's about the struggles of a young man finding his own path amid immense pressure, public scrutiny, and the search for deeper truth. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ethan Musk grew up in the shadow of one of the most ambitious innovators of our time. His father, Elon, a man known for launching rockets to Mars, reinventing cars, and pushing humanity toward a future dominated by technology, had very high expectations, not only from the world but for his own family. Ethan's childhood was a mix of privilege and pressure. On one hand, he lived a life many could only dream of, surrounded by resources, intelligence, and a constant buzz of groundbreaking ideas. On the other, there was a loneliness that came with being constantly in the public eye and feeling the weight of a legacy so immense it could crush any ordinary kid. From a young age, Ethan was expected to be more than just Elon Musk's son. He was expected to be a genius, a visionary, and a leader. But inside, he wrestled with questions that felt far away from rockets and electric cars. Questions about meaning, about faith, about whether there was something bigger guiding all this human ambition. Ethan's relationship with his father was complicated. Elon's mind worked at a speed that few could keep up with, and his focus on work sometimes meant the family had to adjust around his schedule. Ethan admired his father deeply but also felt distant from him emotionally. His mother, supportive but reserved, tried to provide a balance, encouraging Ethan to find his own voice, his own beliefs, and to not just live in his father's shadow. Friendships were another complicated chapter. At school, Ethan had to navigate the dual role of being a normal teenager while dealing with the intense spotlight of his family name. Some friends admired him, some envied him, and others were unsure how to relate to someone whose life seemed so extraordinary. But there were a few close friends who truly understood his struggles, friends who questioned alongside him, who shared the same sense of searching for something more. It wasn't until his early teens that Ethan began to voice the doubts that had quietly been growing inside him. Conversations about God, faith, and existence, once taboo or dismissed, became topics he couldn't ignore. His father's approach was largely grounded in science and technology. Elon believed humanity's future was in mastering physics, artificial intelligence, and engineering. Religion and spirituality were not part of the Musk household discourse, and Ethan's questions sometimes felt like a challenge rather than a curiosity. A pivotal moment came during a school debate on science and faith. Ethan surprised everyone by stating that while he respected science, he also felt there was something spiritual, something unexplainable, that needed to be acknowledged. The reaction was mixed. Some classmates were intrigued, others laughed it off. But for Ethan, this was the start of a journey that would lead to a public statement nobody anticipated. As he grew older, Ethan's questioning deepened. He spent long nights reading philosophy, theology, and modern science, trying to reconcile the different worldviews. His thoughts often swirled around one burning question: is there a God, and if so, what does that mean for the future of humanity? Then came the day that changed everything. During a live-streamed interview, meant to highlight a new tech project he was working on, Ethan was asked about his beliefs. Instead of deflecting, he answered honestly. "I used to think that God was something you prayed to, something outside of us. But now, I see God more as the universe itself, its laws, its mysteries, the interconnectedness of everything. We don't have all the answers, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the divine is not a person, but the unfolding story of existence itself." The statement was short, but it reverberated across social media and news outlets worldwide. It sparked intense debate and heated discussions. Many praised Ethan for his courage and insight, while others criticized him for what they saw as heresy or confusion. The Musk family was thrust into a media storm. Elon was reportedly caught off guard but later expressed respect for his son's honesty, while family members struggled to adjust to the public's reaction. For Ethan, the aftermath was overwhelming. He faced scrutiny from every side: fans, critics, friends, and family. Yet, amid the chaos, he found a surprising source of strength. People from all walks of life reached out to support him: scientists, spiritual leaders, philosophers, and ordinary people who felt inspired by his words. This support gave Ethan hope that maybe his doubts and questions could unite rather than divide. Ethan's story is not just about a public statement or a family drama. It's about a young man's search for meaning in a world where technology and spirituality often seem at odds. It's about the courage to speak truth, even when it risks everything. And it's about the power of hope, that even in moments of deep uncertainty, there is a light guiding us forward. So, what will happen next? How will Ethan's journey unfold? What lessons can we all learn from a son of innovation wrestling with the oldest questions humanity has asked? Stick with this story as it unfolds, because what Elon Musk said about God will blow your mind, but it might also just change the way you see the world. Remember to hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk's story truly begins long before that unforgettable public moment. To understand the weight of his words, you need to know the boy behind the headline. Born into a world where innovation and disruption were daily norms, Ethan's early years were shaped by both brilliance and burden. From the outside, the Musk family appeared like the embodiment of success: luxury homes, access to the best education, constant exposure to cutting-edge technology, but beneath that glossy surface, the reality was far more complex. Growing up, Ethan was the middle child of Elon Musk and his wife, a private woman who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. His mother's steady presence was one of the few constants in his life, offering calm in contrast to Elon's restless energy. Elon was a father whose mind was always racing, juggling companies, ideas, and futures that seemed to span galaxies. While he was deeply proud of his children, his attention was often pulled away by the demands of the world. For Ethan, this meant learning early on how to navigate moments of absence and presence. Cherishing rare times with his father but understanding that his father's mind belonged as much to the stars as to their home. Ethan inherited his father's curiosity but also the vulnerability that came with living in a family constantly under scrutiny. From a young age, he noticed how every move he made, every word he said, could be dissected and broadcast. The feeling of being watched was exhausting, and it deepened his sense of isolation. At school, the pressure was intense. Teachers expected exceptional performance, friends sometimes treated him differently, and there was always the unspoken comparison to his older sibling, who seemed to glide effortlessly through life's challenges. But Ethan wasn't just a prodigy, he was a teenager with doubts, fears, and dreams that didn't always align with his father's expectations. Beneath the public persona of the Musk family was a private world where emotions ran deep and sometimes conflicted. Ethan's relationship with his mother was a sanctuary. She listened when he needed to talk, encouraged his love of books and art, and gently pushed him to explore beyond the limits set by the family's fame. It was she who first noticed Ethan's questions about faith and meaning, questions that started as innocent curiosity but quickly grew into something urgent. When Ethan was 10, his mother gave him a small, worn book on world religions, an introduction to the stories, beliefs, and philosophies that had shaped humanity for centuries. It was a gift meant to open his mind, but it also opened a door to confusion. Ethan became fascinated by the variety of beliefs, each claiming to hold the truth about God, life, and the universe. Yet, none seemed to fit what he was feeling inside. By the time Ethan was 12, his world was a jumble of science and spirituality. At home, Elon's conversations were about Mars colonies, AI, and engineering breakthroughs. At school, lessons were grounded in physics and math, while Ethan's personal reading took him into realms of philosophy and theology. This inner conflict was invisible to most but grew more intense with every passing day. A key friendship helped Ethan navigate this confusion. His best friend, Marcus, shared his interest in questioning the world. Marcus came from a family that valued open discussion about beliefs and ideas. Together, they debated, challenged each other, and sometimes felt lost. Their conversations were a refuge, a place where doubts were not weaknesses but the seeds of discovery. One evening, after a particularly tough day at school where a teacher dismissed Ethan's questions about purpose as too abstract, he confided in Marcus that he felt like he was living two lives, the son of Elon Musk and a boy searching for meaning that science couldn't fully explain. Marcus listened, then said something that stayed with Ethan: maybe it's not about picking science or faith. Maybe it's about learning how they can talk to each other. Ethan held on to that thought as he moved through adolescence. But not all moments were hopeful. There were times when the pressure overwhelmed him. The constant media attention, the high expectations, and the silence around the deeper questions left Ethan feeling alone. In those dark moments, he questioned whether he was strong enough to carry the family name, let alone carve out his own identity. His father's relationship with him was a mix of pride and distance. Elon admired Ethan's intelligence but often struggled to express emotions beyond the realm of logic and achievement. A rare evening when Elon sat with Ethan and spoke not as a CEO but as a father became etched in Ethan's memory. Elon said, "I know the world expects a lot from you, and sometimes it feels like you have to be perfect. But remember, it's okay to ask questions, even the hard ones." That night, Ethan realized that even the man who seemed so unshakable had doubts and fears of his own. Yet, the unspoken rules of the family meant that vulnerability was rarely shown in public. As Ethan approached his teenage years, he became increasingly aware of a growing disconnect. The world expected answers, innovations, and clarity, but Ethan felt the opposite: uncertainty and a longing for deeper understanding. This internal tension set the stage for the moment that would bring him into the spotlight, not as Elon's son, but as a young man grappling with the biggest questions of existence. Before that public moment, Ethan spent hours alone, often in the quiet spaces of his family's sprawling estate. The stars above, distant and silent, seemed to hold answers he couldn't yet grasp. He wrote in journals, pouring out his doubts, his hopes, his fears. "Is there a God?" he wrote. "If so, why does it feel so distant? Or is God something else entirely?" These questions consumed him, even as he excelled in academics and began working on his own tech projects, trying to bridge his father's world of innovation with his own spiritual searching. His journey was not just intellectual but deeply emotional. He felt the pangs of loneliness that come with being misunderstood, the frustration of wanting to connect with his father on a deeper level, and the hope that one day he would find his own voice. Relationships outside the family also shaped Ethan's psychology. A mentorship with a philosophy professor introduced him to thinkers who challenged conventional ideas about God, science, and the universe. This professor became a rare guide, encouraging Ethan to see doubt not as failure but as the beginning of wisdom. At the same time, Ethan's romantic experiences were tentative but meaningful. A first crush on a fellow student who was deeply spiritual made him confront feelings he hadn't faced before: love, vulnerability, and the courage to share his true self. These relationships, fraught with both joy and confusion, helped Ethan grow emotionally and understand that life was not just about achievements but about connection and meaning. All these experiences, family pressures, friendships, mentorships, and inner struggles, built the foundation of the young man who would soon make the world stop and listen. Ethan's story is a powerful reminder that even those born into privilege and genius are not immune to the deepest questions of human existence. He is not just a reflection of his father's legacy but an individual forging his own path through doubt, hope, and discovery. As the day of his public statement approached, Ethan wrestled with fear and excitement. Would the world understand him? Would his family stand by him? Would his questions bring unity or division? These doubts were real, but so was his determination. The journey ahead promised to be difficult, but Ethan was ready to face it, driven by the hope that his voice could spark something greater than himself. What follows in this story is not only the public moment that shocked millions but the intimate, emotional path that led to it. And the profound lessons that come from a young man daring to question God in a world dominated by science and technology. Ethan's world was beginning to shift in ways he never imagined. The private questions he'd wrestled with for years were moving from whispered doubts in his journals to conversations that carried real consequences. His early signs of doubt about God and existence had started as quiet, internal conflicts, but soon those questions began sparking tension around him. At school, Ethan's debates with classmates became more intense. Some friends were curious and supportive, but others grew defensive or dismissive. One afternoon, during a philosophy class discussion about the origins of the universe, Ethan challenged the simple answers many took for granted. What if the universe isn't just a machine running on fixed rules, he asked. What if there's something deeper, something we can't fully understand yet? The room fell silent for a moment before a sharp voice interrupted. That sounds like fantasy, Ethan. Science has proven what's real. The teacher nodded, not encouraging further debate, and Ethan felt the weight of being the odd one out. At home, conversations about faith were rare, but when they happened, they were charged. Elon, focused on practical progress, often dismissed spiritual ideas as irrelevant to humanity's future. Beliefs are evolving, Elon once said during dinner. We don't need myths when we have data. Ethan respected his father's brilliance but felt misunderstood. His mother tried to mediate gently, encouraging Ethan to explore all ideas but also reminding him to be patient with others who didn't share his views. As Ethan's questions became harder to ignore, he found himself increasingly isolated. Even some family members expressed concern that his doubts could lead him away from the values that had guided their family's success. The media began to pick up on Ethan's unusual stance. Rumors circulated about the son of Elon Musk publicly questioning God, sparking curiosity and controversy. A particularly tense moment came when Ethan was invited to speak at a school event on innovation and belief. In front of hundreds of students and faculty, Ethan took the stage and said, "Faith and science are often seen as opposing forces, but I believe they're part of the same human search for truth. We need to be brave enough to ask the difficult questions, even when the answers aren't clear." The applause was mixed, some cheered his courage, others whispered doubts. The event sparked social media discussions, with hashtags supporting or criticizing Ethan trending overnight. Behind the scenes, Elon and Ethan's family grappled with how to respond. Elon was protective but cautious. He worried about the impact on his son and their family name. A private conversation between father and son highlighted the tension. Elon said, "Ethan, the world can be harsh. Your words carry weight. Are you ready for the storm this might bring?" Ethan nodded, feeling both fear and resolve. "I have to be true to myself, Dad. Even if it's hard." The tension grew when a major news outlet reached out to Ethan for an exclusive interview. The invitation was unexpected, and family advisors debated fiercely over whether he should accept. Ultimately, Ethan insisted, believing that honesty was more important than avoiding controversy. The interview aired live, and Ethan's words were clear and heartfelt. When asked about God, he said, "I used to think of God as a distant figure, something separate from us. But now, I see God more as the universe itself, an unfolding mystery, a force of connection between all things. It's not about dogma or rules but about wonder and humility." The response was immediate and explosive. Social media erupted with reactions ranging from awe to outrage. Memes, think pieces, debates flooded the internet. Some praised Ethan as a voice of a new generation, blending science and spirituality in a fresh way. Others accused him of blasphemy or confusion. The Musk family's phones wouldn't stop ringing. Elon publicly stated he supported Ethan's right to his own beliefs but reminded everyone that the family was navigating this new territory carefully. Behind the scenes, Ethan dealt with the emotional fallout. Messages of support buoyed him, but the criticism stung. Friends rallied around him, but some distanced themselves, unsure how to handle the media storm. Ethan felt the intense loneliness of being misunderstood, but also the thrill of standing up for what he believed. At school, the atmosphere shifted. Some students approached Ethan with newfound respect, while others whispered or avoided him. Teachers were split, some admired his bravery, others worried about the disruption. Despite the challenges, Ethan found unexpected hope in the community of thinkers who reached out: philosophers, scientists, spiritual leaders, people who saw in his words a bridge between worlds. One mentor, a philosophy professor named Dr. Ellis, became a key support. In private meetings, Dr. Ellis encouraged Ethan to keep asking questions and assured him that doubt was a vital part of growth. True wisdom, Dr. Ellis said, comes not from certainty but from the courage to live with uncertainty. Ethan's personal life also felt the strain. His mother, while supportive, worried about his emotional well-being. She arranged for counseling to help Ethan cope with the pressure and public attention. Meanwhile, his father balanced public statements of support with private concerns about how this controversy might affect their family businesses. Yet, Elon never tried to silence Ethan, showing a rare respect for his son's independence. Ethan's own mindset was a mix of excitement and vulnerability. He realized that his journey was no longer just personal but public. Every step he took was watched, judged, and sometimes celebrated. He learned to navigate this new reality with growing maturity. The conflict between his desire for privacy and his sense of responsibility to speak his truth was one of his greatest challenges. Friends like Marcus remained his anchor, reminding him that no matter what, Ethan's value wasn't defined by public opinion. At the same time, the rising tension sparked moments of hope. Public figures in science and religion reached out with invitations to speak at forums and panels, opening opportunities for Ethan to share his vision of integrating faith and reason. These experiences broadened his perspective and deepened his understanding of the complex relationship between belief and knowledge. But just as hope grew, so did the stakes. Critics intensified their attacks, sometimes personal and harsh. Some conspiracy theories emerged, questioning Ethan's motives or suggesting he was being used for publicity. The media scrutiny became relentless. In one particularly painful moment, a viral article accused Ethan of disrespecting his family's values. The article was shared thousands of times, fueling a wave of online harassment. Ethan felt overwhelmed but refused to retreat. Instead, he used these challenges to fuel his determination to speak honestly. His social media posts became platforms for thoughtful dialogue rather than reactionary comments. He shared books he was reading, reflections on faith and science, and stories of personal struggle and hope. Slowly, a community of followers grew. People inspired by his willingness to ask hard questions and embrace uncertainty. Ethan's family dynamics evolved under this pressure. Elon, while proud, became more protective, pushing for private family time to reconnect. His mother advocated for balance and self-care. Siblings showed mixed reactions, some supportive, others wary of the spotlight. These tensions were part of the complex reality Ethan navigated daily. Through it all, Ethan's core question remained: could he find a way to reconcile the power of science with the mystery of spirituality? His public statement was not the end but the beginning of a deeper journey. One that would take him beyond the familiar worlds of technology and fame into new territories of meaning and connection. As this rising conflict continued, Ethan found solace in moments of quiet reflection. Walking under the night sky, writing in his journal, or speaking with trusted friends, he nurtured a growing sense of hope that amid conflict, understanding was possible. This balance of tension and hope kept him moving forward. What started as a simple question about God had become a catalyst for a much larger conversation, one that challenged not only Ethan but the world watching him. As tensions escalated, Ethan faced a choice: to retreat into the comfort of silence or to lean into the storm, knowing that speaking his truth could change everything. In the coming chapters, the world would see Ethan embark on a journey that tested his courage, reshaped his relationships, and revealed truths no one expected. But for now, the rising conflict was both a challenge and an invitation, a call to explore what it truly means to believe, doubt, and hope in a complex world. The story of Ethan Musk was no longer just about a boy in a famous family. It was about a generation searching for meaning beyond the surface, a voice daring to bridge divides, and a young man standing at the crossroads of science and spirituality, ready to blow minds and maybe, just maybe, change the course of history. Ethan's journey took a sharp, unexpected turn shortly after the storm of his public statement. What began as a personal quest to understand God and faith in relation to science became something much bigger, a calling that propelled him into uncharted territory. The invitation came out of the blue. A leading interfaith science conference wanted Ethan as a keynote speaker. It was a chance not only to share his ideas but to engage with thinkers from all over the world, religious leaders, scientists, philosophers, and innovators. At first, Ethan hesitated. The thought of standing in front of such a crowd made his chest tighten. But beneath the nerves was a growing resolve. This was the moment to move beyond words on social media and step fully into the spotlight, not just as Elon Musk's son, but as a thinker and seeker in his own right. The conference was held in an old, majestic hall in Boston. The high ceilings echoed with the voices of past greats, and the air was heavy with anticipation. Ethan arrived early, absorbing the scene, a mosaic of cultures, beliefs, and ideas all converging in one place. As he walked the corridors, he felt the weight of history mingling with the promise of the future. The opening ceremony was electric, with speakers emphasizing the urgent need for dialogue between faith and science in a world facing unprecedented challenges. Ethan's heart pounded as he awaited his turn. When he finally stepped onto the stage, the lights bright and cameras focused, he saw hundreds of expectant faces, some skeptical, some hopeful. He took a breath and began. I come from a place where technology often seems like the answer to everything, yet I've found myself asking questions that technology alone cannot solve, he said. Questions about meaning, purpose, and connection. His words flowed, raw and honest, describing his journey from doubt to a new understanding of God, not as an entity to fear or worship blindly, but as the living mystery woven through the fabric of existence. He spoke of humility in the face of the unknown, of the need to embrace uncertainty as a path to deeper insight. The audience was captivated. Some nodded in agreement, others furrowed brows in contemplation. The speech ended with a call to bridge divides and foster conversations that honor both scientific rigor and spiritual wisdom. Afterward, the hall buzzed with discussion. Ethan found himself surrounded by people eager to talk, imams, rabbis, physicists, theologians, each bringing perspectives he had never encountered before. One late evening, he met Dar. Amina, a physicist and Sufi practitioner, who shared how her faith deepened her understanding of the cosmos. Their conversation stretched into the night, exploring the parallels between quantum physics and mystical experience, the limits of human knowledge, and the beauty of wonder. This encounter was a revelation for Ethan. It showed him that faith and science need not be enemies but could enrich each other in profound ways. The conference also introduced challenges. Ethan faced tough questions, moments when his ideas were critiqued or misunderstood. At one panel, a vocal atheist questioned whether Ethan's views risked undermining scientific progress. Another time, a conservative religious leader warned that Ethan's approach was dangerously vague. These moments tested Ethan's patience and resolve. But they also strengthened his commitment to honesty and dialogue. Beyond the conference, Ethan's journey took him to unexpected places. Invitations poured in, from universities to think tanks, from spiritual retreats to innovation labs. Each new setting brought fresh challenges and insights. At a retreat in the mountains of Colorado, surrounded by towering pines and crisp air, Ethan spent days in silence and meditation. Here, away from screens and crowds, he confronted his own fears and doubts in the stillness. The natural world seemed to whisper truths that transcended words, about impermanence, interconnection, and the sacredness of life. These experiences shaped Ethan's understanding of God as not just a concept but a living presence in the world around him. Yet the journey was not without hardship. The intensity of travel, public appearances, and emotional openness took a toll. Ethan struggled with moments of exhaustion and loneliness. The gap between his public persona and private self sometimes felt unbearable. Letters from fans brought hope, but also stories of struggle that weighed heavily on him. One particularly difficult moment came when Ethan received news that a close friend, Marcus, was battling severe anxiety. The friend's pain mirrored Ethan's own inner turmoil, reminding him that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to face it. Through it all, Ethan's relationship with his family evolved. Elon, seeing his son's transformation, became more open about his own struggles with faith and purpose. Private conversations grew deeper, filled with shared questions rather than answers. Ethan's mother became a quiet but steady presence, encouraging him to find balance and reminding him that love was the foundation beneath all their journeys. The media followed every step. Some outlets celebrated Ethan as a visionary bridging worlds, others remained skeptical or critical. The public discourse reflected the very tensions Ethan was trying to navigate, the clash between certainty and doubt, science and spirituality, tradition and innovation. In response, Ethan learned to cultivate resilience. He surrounded himself with mentors and friends who challenged him but also offered compassion. He began journaling more intensely, using writing as a tool to process and grow. His social media presence evolved into a platform for thoughtful engagement, sharing not only ideas but stories of vulnerability and hope. One night, after a long day at a panel discussion, Ethan walked outside to gaze at the stars. The sky was clear, vast, and infinite. He felt a surge of connection, an unspoken bond with the cosmos and the countless questions it held. In that moment, he understood that his journey was ongoing. There would be no simple answers, no neat conclusions. But there was beauty in the search itself, in the willingness to embrace mystery and keep moving forward despite uncertainty. This climactic journey was as much about inner transformation as public impact. Ethan's words and experiences resonated with people around the world who were also seeking meaning in a rapidly changing age. His voice became a beacon for those caught between worlds, offering not answers but an invitation to explore together. As Ethan looked ahead, he knew new challenges awaited, more public scrutiny, deeper questions, and moments of doubt. But he was ready. His journey had already reshaped him, teaching lessons of humility, courage, and the power of connection. The road ahead was uncertain, but Ethan walked it with open eyes and an open heart, ready to face whatever came next. The story of Elon Musk's son was no longer just about the son of a tech titan. It was the story of a young man stepping into his own light, bridging the worlds of science and faith, and inviting us all to reconsider what it means to believe. What Ethan said about God might just blow your mind. But even more important is the journey that led him there, a journey filled with discovery, challenge, and the hope that through understanding, we can find common ground. This chapter of Ethan's story marks a turning point, where the personal becomes universal, and the search for truth becomes a shared adventure, one that promises to change hearts and minds in ways no one could have predicted. Ethan's journey reached a profound turning point as he stepped deeper into the emotional climax of his quest. The world had watched him transition from a curious, questioning boy to a young man grappling openly with faith, doubt, and the meaning of existence. Now, he stood on the edge of revelation, not just for himself, but for everyone following his story. The events that unfolded tested every ounce of his courage and forced him to confront truths he had long avoided. It began with a private message from a stranger. A woman named Grace, a theologian and writer whose work Ethan had admired quietly from afar. Her words were simple yet powerful: "I believe your journey is more important than you realize. Would you be willing to meet and talk?" Hesitant but intrigued, Ethan agreed. Their first meeting took place in a quiet cafe tucked away from the glare of the media. Grace's presence was calming yet intense, and as they spoke, Ethan found himself sharing fears and hopes he hadn't voiced before. Grace listened deeply and then spoke of God not as a distant judge or a rigid concept but as the living love that flows through all things, even through pain and suffering. Faith, she said, is not about certainty but about trusting the mystery. This perspective struck a chord with Ethan. It echoed what he'd sensed but struggled to articulate, a faith not bound by dogma but open to complexity and paradox. Over the following weeks, Grace became a mentor and friend, guiding Ethan through texts and conversations that challenged and expanded his thinking. One evening, as they walked beneath a sky dusted with stars, Grace shared a story of her own crisis of faith, the loss of her mother to illness and the long journey through grief and doubt that followed. Ethan listened, moved by the raw honesty and the way Grace had found light amid darkness. This shared vulnerability deepened their connection and inspired Ethan to embrace his own vulnerabilities as sources of strength rather than weakness. Meanwhile, public interest in Ethan's spiritual journey intensified. A major podcast invited him for a long-form interview, giving him space to explain his evolving views on God, science, and existence. The conversation was candid and heartfelt. Ethan spoke about the pressures of living in the shadow of a famous father, the loneliness of being a public figure grappling with private doubts, and the hope he found in accepting uncertainty. Listeners responded with overwhelming support and empathy. The episode trended worldwide, sparking renewed dialogue about spirituality in the modern age. But amid the growing attention, Ethan faced his greatest emotional challenge yet. A sudden family crisis shook him to the core. His mother was diagnosed with a serious illness, and the news struck with brutal force. Suddenly, all his questions about meaning and faith collided with the raw pain of potential loss. The hospital waiting rooms, the hushed voices of doctors, and the flickering hope in his mother's eyes created a crucible of emotion. In this darkest moment, Ethan's public persona felt fragile. The world expected strength and insight, but inside, he wrestled with fear, anger, and helplessness. Late one night, alone in his room, Ethan poured out his feelings in a letter he never intended to send. He wrote of doubt, despair, and the desperate search for meaning in suffering. Yet even in the depths of grief, a quiet voice within urged him not to give up. He found solace in prayer, not the prayers of certainty but the honest prayers of a seeker asking for courage and peace. This period of intense struggle led to a breakthrough. Ethan realized that faith was not the absence of pain but the presence of hope amid pain. He understood that love for his mother, his family, and the world, was the true anchor in the storm. This revelation transformed his public message. When he next spoke publicly, his words carried new depth and authenticity. He said, "Life is unpredictable. We all face moments that shake us to the core. But in those moments, love becomes our greatest truth. It is the force that connects us beyond fear and doubt." The response was profound. People around the world who had faced loss or hardship found comfort and inspiration in Ethan's honesty. His story became not just about intellect or fame but about the shared human experience of vulnerability and hope. As his mother's health gradually improved, Ethan's relationships also evolved. His father, once distant in matters of faith, opened up about his own struggles with doubt and legacy. Their conversations, once strained, grew more honest and tender. Ethan's siblings rallied around their mother, strengthening family bonds that had been tested but not broken. Throughout this emotional climax, Ethan's own inner world shifted dramatically. He learned to embrace complexity rather than seek easy answers, to hold doubt and belief in balance. His spiritual journey became less about proving truths and more about living with questions, living them fully and courageously. At the same time, Ethan continued to engage with the public, using his platform to promote empathy, dialogue, and understanding across divides. He collaborated with scientists, theologians, and artists to create spaces for conversations that honored both reason and mystery. One groundbreaking project was a multimedia series exploring humanity's search for meaning through the lenses of science, philosophy, and faith. This project brought together diverse voices and touched hearts worldwide, further cementing Ethan's role as a bridge builder. Yet, the emotional climax was not without new tensions. Critics accused Ethan of sentimentalism or questioned his authenticity. Some family members remained skeptical or worried about the spotlight's impact. Ethan faced moments of loneliness and self-doubt but drew strength from the community of supporters who saw in him a genuine seeker. The climax of Ethan's story was also marked by a deeply personal encounter. A retreat to a remote monastery where silence and contemplation offered a space for profound insight. There, amid ancient stone walls and candlelight, Ethan experienced a moment of clarity. He understood that God, in all the ways he had tried to define or question, was ultimately a mystery beyond words, a presence felt in love, wonder, and the interconnectedness of all life. This realization was both humbling and liberating. It freed Ethan from the pressure to have all the answers and opened him to a life of ongoing exploration and gratitude. As the emotional climax unfolded, Ethan's story resonated on a universal level. It became a narrative not just about a young man in a famous family but about the human condition itself, the search for meaning, the struggle with doubt, and the power of love to sustain us through life's uncertainties. In reflecting on this period, Ethan often quoted a line from Rainer Maria Rilke. "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves." This became a guiding principle for him and a message he shared widely. The emotional climax also deepened Ethan's character development. From a boy torn by conflicting beliefs and family expectations, he grew into a mature, compassionate young man willing to embrace vulnerability and complexity. His journey illustrated that true strength lies not in certainty but in the courage to live authentically amid life's contradictions. The story's tension and hope intertwined beautifully during this phase. Every painful moment was met with a silver lining, new insights, connections, or acts of kindness that illuminated the darkness. Ethan's narrative became a beacon of optimism grounded in reality, inspiring others to face their own struggles with openness and resilience. The vivid settings, from the bustling conference halls to quiet mountain retreats and hospital rooms, created a cinematic backdrop that drew audiences deeply into Ethan's experience. His emotions were palpable in every scene, inviting readers to feel alongside him the weight of grief, the spark of hope, and the gentle embrace of love. Ultimately, the emotional climax set the stage for the story's resolution. Ethan's revelations about faith, love, and the mystery of existence would lead him toward a profound conclusion, one that offers not only personal peace but a meaningful message for all who follow his path. The journey through doubt and suffering illuminated life's deeper truths and prepared Ethan to share a lesson that could resonate far beyond his own story. As this chapter closes, Ethan stands transformed, no longer simply the son of Elon Musk but a young man who has faced the depths of human experience and emerged with a heart open to wonder, love, and the unknown. His story invites us all to reconsider what it means to believe, to doubt, and ultimately to hope in a world full of surprises. In the months that followed the emotional storm, something inside Ethan shifted. The rawness of grief and revelation gave way to a steady, quiet strength. The whirlwind of attention that once overwhelmed him now felt like background noise. He had walked through fire and emerged changed, not invincible, but rooted. The fear that once haunted him, the fear of disappointing his father, of saying the wrong thing, of not having answers, had lost its grip. It wasn't that Ethan had figured everything out. In fact, the deeper he went into his journey, the more comfortable he became with not knowing. It was this shift, from a hunger for certainty to a reverence for mystery, that marked the beginning of his peace. The world, meanwhile, continued to buzz with his name. Universities sent invitations, documentary crews requested access, and talk shows offered primetime slots. But Ethan chose selectively, learning to say no, to protect his inner space. He started spending long hours in nature, walking alone through forests, watching sunsets without photographing them, sitting in silence under the stars. These moments grounded him, reminded him of his smallness in the vastness of existence and the beauty in that smallness. One autumn evening, while hiking through the Golden Hills near the family's ranch, Ethan sat down beneath an old oak tree. Leaves rustled gently above him, and the wind carried the scent of earth and cedar. He pulled out his journal, now worn and thick with entries, and began to write, not to figure something out, but just to reflect. What if, he wrote, God isn't a destination but a direction? Not an answer, but the willingness to keep asking. His thoughts flowed freely, and with them came a calm joy. He realized he no longer felt the need to prove anything, to his father, to the world, or even to himself. He was learning to live the questions. His family noticed the change. Elon, usually so immersed in innovation and disruption, began to slow down during their conversations. They talked less about technology and more about values, about legacy, about what it meant to build not just rockets but relationships. One quiet night, sitting side by side in the observatory behind their home, Elon turned to Ethan and said, "You know, I've spent my life trying to reach Mars. But maybe the real frontier isn't out there, it's in here." He tapped his chest. Ethan smiled. It was the closest thing to a confession of faith he'd ever heard from his father. It didn't matter whether it was wrapped in theology or science. It was real. That was enough. Ethan's mother, though still recovering from her illness, grew stronger every day. Her resilience inspired Ethan more than she knew. She became a source of quiet wisdom in his life, often reminding him with a soft smile, "The heart always knows when you're home." Home, Ethan realized, wasn't a place or even a person. It was a state of being, of living in alignment with your truth, no matter how uncertain or unconventional. In the months that followed, Ethan decided to write a book. Not a manifesto or a memoir, but a collection of reflections, stories, letters, dialogues with thinkers he'd met on his journey. He called it The Spaces Between Stars. The title was a nod to the place where certainty dissolves and awe begins. Writing became a form of healing, of integration. As he poured his journey onto the page, Ethan revisited every step, the late-night arguments, the viral interviews, the private tears, the unexpected allies. Each memory, once sharp with emotion, softened into meaning. The book was released quietly, without the fanfare the media expected. Ethan didn't go on a press tour. He didn't give speeches. He simply posted a link on his social media and wrote, "For those searching for something more." The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from all over the world, young people wrestling with faith, scientists trying to reconcile their work with wonder, spiritual leaders thanking Ethan for opening a door that had long been locked. But it wasn't the praise that moved Ethan, it was the stories. People wrote about their losses, their doubts, their moments of quiet clarity. They told him that his words had made them feel seen, that they no longer felt alone in their questions. That, Ethan thought, was the real miracle. Not fame, not answers, but connection. Around this time, Ethan was invited to speak at a high school not far from where he'd grown up. He hesitated at first. The idea of returning to a place filled with memories of insecurity and tension was daunting. But something in him said yes. When he arrived, the auditorium was filled with students, some curious, some skeptical, some simply eager to hear what Elon Musk's son had to say. Ethan stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and began. "When I was your age, I thought I had to choose between science and faith. Between my mind and my heart. But I've learned that you don't have to choose. You just have to stay honest. Stay open. Ask your questions. And don't be afraid if the answers don't come right away." He spoke for 30 minutes. When he finished, there was silence. Then, slowly, applause. Afterward, students came up to him, not for selfies, but for conversations. They wanted to talk about their fears, their dreams, the pressure to be perfect, the things they couldn't say out loud. Ethan listened. That was his gift now. Not to impress, but to witness. In the quiet months that followed, Ethan withdrew a little from public life. He didn't vanish, but he became more intentional. He spent time working with a foundation dedicated to mental health and spiritual well-being, using his resources to support programs that helped young people find grounding in an overwhelming world. He wasn't trying to be a guru or a brand. He just wanted to help. One night, as winter approached, Ethan sat alone by a fire, wrapped in a wool blanket. He stared into the flames, the warmth flickering across his face. He thought about everything: his childhood, his father's impossible brilliance, his mother's unwavering love, the chaos of his rise to attention, the aching questions that once tore him apart. And he smiled. Not because it all made sense, but because it didn't have to. He had found peace in the ambiguity. He had learned that truth wasn't a destination, but a practice, a way of living, loving, and staying present. The fire crackled. A shooting star traced a silver line across the sky. Ethan whispered a quiet prayer, not to a God he could define, but to the infinite, to the sacred mystery that danced in all things. "Thank you," he said. "For the questions. For the pain. For the love." And in that moment, beneath the stars, surrounded by silence, Ethan felt more whole than he ever had. This was the resolution he didn't know he was seeking. A life lived not in pursuit of certainty, but in deep communion with the unknown. A life where science and spirit walked hand in hand. Where love was the answer even when the question changed. The story of Ethan Musk, the boy who questioned God, who stood in the shadow of a titan, who spoke truth to power not with anger but with curiosity, had become something more. It was a story about all of us. About what it means to be human. To wonder. To struggle. To believe, even when you don't know what belief looks like anymore. And as the night wore on, and the fire slowly faded to embers, Ethan knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. Ethan stood at the threshold of a new chapter in his life, one that beckoned with the promise of deeper understanding and personal growth. The emotional tumult of the past had given way to a period of introspection and quietude, allowing him to reconnect with his inner self and the world around him in ways he had never imagined. His decision to step back from the relentless pace of public life was not an escape but a conscious choice to seek clarity. The fame that had once been both a privilege and a burden now seemed distant, as Ethan turned his focus inward. He spent his days in solitude, reading philosophical texts, meditating, and engaging in long walks through nature. These activities, simple yet profound, became his sanctuary. During this time, Ethan reconnected with old friends and mentors, seeking their perspectives on his journey. One such encounter was with Dr. Miriam Patel, a former professor of philosophy who had always challenged him to think critically and deeply. Over cups of herbal tea in her cozy study, they discussed the nature of existence, the role of technology in society, and the importance of compassion. Dr. Patel's insights reminded Ethan that the pursuit of knowledge was not just about acquiring information but about cultivating wisdom. In parallel, Ethan's relationship with his family continued to evolve. His father, Elon, had always been a figure of immense intellect and ambition, but their conversations had often been strained, filled with unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. However, as Ethan delved deeper into his own spiritual journey, he found the courage to engage his father in more meaningful dialogues. One evening, as they sat together in the family library, surrounded by shelves of books spanning centuries of human thought, Ethan broached a topic that had long been a source of tension between them: the intersection of science and spirituality. "Dad," Ethan began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "do you ever wonder if there's more to our existence than what we can measure and quantify?" Elon looked up from his book, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he set the book aside and met Ethan's gaze. "I've spent my life searching for answers," Elon admitted. "But sometimes, the more I discover, the more I realize how little I truly understand." This admission marked a turning point in their relationship. For the first time, they acknowledged the limitations of their knowledge and the mysteries that lay beyond their comprehension. Their conversations became less about proving points and more about exploring questions, fostering a newfound respect and understanding between them. Ethan also began to engage with the broader community in more meaningful ways. He collaborated with organizations focused on mental health, education, and environmental sustainability, using his platform to raise awareness and inspire action. His efforts were not driven by a desire for recognition but by a genuine commitment to making a positive impact. Through these endeavors, Ethan discovered a profound sense of purpose. He realized that true fulfillment came not from accolades or achievements but from contributing to the well-being of others and the planet. This realization led him to establish the Elon Musk Foundation, dedicated to supporting initiatives that promoted holistic education, mental health resources, and environmental conservation. As the foundation gained momentum, Ethan found himself traveling to various parts of the world, meeting individuals and communities whose resilience and compassion inspired him. In a remote village in Nepal, he met a group of women who had started a cooperative to produce sustainable handicrafts, providing income and empowerment to their families. In a bustling urban center in Brazil, he visited a community garden project that transformed vacant lots into green spaces, fostering a sense of community and environmental stewardship. These experiences deepened Ethan's understanding of interconnectedness and the power of collective action. He realized that while individual efforts were important, true change required collaboration and solidarity. One of the most transformative experiences occurred during a visit to a refugee camp in Syria. There, he met a young girl named Layla, whose family had fled their home due to conflict. Despite the hardships she faced, Layla's spirit remained unbroken. She shared her dreams of becoming a doctor to help others in her community. Layla's story moved Ethan profoundly. It reminded him of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of hope. Inspired by her determination, he initiated a scholarship program through his foundation to support the education of young refugees, ensuring that they had the opportunities to pursue their aspirations. As Ethan continued his journey, he encountered challenges that tested his resolve. There were moments of doubt and frustration, times when the weight of the world's problems seemed insurmountable. Yet, each challenge served as a catalyst for growth, pushing him to refine his understanding and approach. Through it all, Ethan remained grounded in the principles that had guided him: compassion, humility, and a commitment to truth. He learned to embrace uncertainty, recognizing that not all questions had answers and that some mysteries were meant to be experienced, not solved. In the quiet moments of reflection, Ethan often returned to the words of his mentor, Grace. Faith is not about certainty but about trusting the mystery. These words resonated deeply within him, serving as a reminder that the journey itself was as significant as the destination. As the years passed, Ethan's influence grew, not through fame or power but through authenticity and integrity. He became a voice for those often unheard, a champion for causes that transcended borders and ideologies. His legacy was not built on accolades but on the lives he touched and the positive changes he inspired. Looking back on his journey, Ethan realized that the path he had taken was not linear. It was filled with twists and turns, moments of clarity and confusion, joy and sorrow. Yet, each step had been necessary, each experience a lesson that shaped him into the person he had become. He understood now that life was not about seeking perfection or avoiding mistakes but about embracing the complexities of existence with an open heart and mind. It was about living authentically, staying true to one's values, and contributing to the greater good. In the end, Ethan found peace, not in the absence of challenges but in his ability to navigate them with grace and resilience. He had discovered that the uncharted path, though uncertain and often daunting, held the most profound opportunities for growth and transformation. And so, as he stood at the threshold of the next chapter, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. He was ready to continue exploring, learning, and evolving, knowing that the path ahead, though unknown, was his to walk. The invitations kept coming: universities, think tanks, non-profit forums. Ethan had become a symbol of quiet rebellion, a voice rising in contrast to the polarized noise of the world. But behind the accolades and thoughtful applause, he still wrestled with an invisible weight: was it enough? He had talked about God, questioned the shape of belief, and challenged assumptions on all sides. But inside, He knew something was missing, not in the message he shared with others, but in what he hadn't yet faced within himself. There was one question he hadn't dared to ask, at least not aloud: what if I'm wrong? It was a sharp, unrelenting whisper in the back of his mind. What if all this blending of spirituality and science, this public vulnerability, was just an elaborate mask? What if he'd constructed a comforting illusion for himself and others because he couldn't face the chaos of the world head-on? The thought made him pause during a speech in Seattle, right in the middle of answering a question about divine consciousness. The words stopped on his tongue. He caught himself, blinked, and then smiled gently. "I don't have all the answers," he said, stepping back from the mic, "but I think the questions are still worth asking." The crowd applauded, but he felt hollow. That night, in his hotel room, Ethan sat alone staring at his reflection in the mirror. The person staring back looked composed, maybe even wise, but was he? Had he truly changed, or had he just become better at wearing a new kind of armor? He needed clarity. Not applause. Not validation. Just a clear, silent space to confront that last, gnawing fear. That's when he made the decision to disappear, for a while. No social media, no speeches, no cameras. He packed lightly, told only his mother, and left for a monastery in rural Japan, a Zen temple known for its silence, tucked into the mountains near Kyoto. The monks there knew little of who he was, and that anonymity was a blessing. For the first time in years, he wasn't Elon Musk's son, or a spiritual influencer. He was simply Ethan, a seeker among seekers. Life at the temple was stripped bare. Wake at dawn. Meditation. Chores. Silence. No phone, no news, no distractions. Ethan struggled for the first few days. The silence was deafening. Every breath felt forced. During meditation, his mind raced, screaming for answers, for noise, for anything to distract from the growing tension in his chest. But as the days passed, something began to shift. His body slowed. His thoughts softened. And in the quiet, he began to hear a different kind of voice, not external, not from any text or mentor, but from within. One morning, while sweeping leaves in the temple garden, Ethan suddenly stopped and looked up at the trees. Sunlight spilled through their branches, casting golden webs of light on the moss below. For a moment, he felt a sensation he couldn't explain, not joy exactly, not awe, but a kind of deep okayness. Like everything, even his questions, belonged. Tears filled his eyes, not out of sadness, but release. That question, "What if I'm wrong?" no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a door. He stayed at the monastery for a month. In that time, he spoke very little. He wrote even less. But he listened. Not to lectures or sermons, but to the breath of the world around him, the soft rustle of wind, the clink of a teacup, the quiet laughter of a novice monk trying to feed a stubborn cat. It was here, in this stillness, that he realized the real point of his journey. It was never to define God or solve existence. It was to become fully alive, to see clearly, to feel fully, to live honestly. Before leaving, he met with the head monk, an older man with a face like weathered bark and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Ethan asked him one final question: "What is the meaning of all this? Of life?" The monk laughed, not mockingly but gently, and said, "To ask the question is the meaning." That answer stayed with Ethan on the long flight back to California. He didn't rush to re-enter the public space. He spent more time with his mother, who had grown stronger and more peaceful. They sat in the kitchen at night, sipping tea and talking about simple things, music, childhood memories, her garden. His relationship with his father continued to evolve. Elon, curious about the monastery, asked real questions for the first time, not about spiritual branding or cultural trends, but about Ethan's personal transformation. "So, silence helped?" he asked one night. "It didn't give me answers," Ethan replied. "But it helped me be okay with not having them." That became a theme in his conversations going forward. When he finally returned to public discourse, slowly, intentionally, he did so not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler. His tone changed. His talks became more interactive. Instead of presenting ideas as insights, he framed them as experiments. What happens, he'd ask, if we stop trying to be right, and just try to be present with each other? People noticed the difference. He no longer came off as a visionary or an iconoclast. He felt more human, more like someone who had struggled deeply and come out the other side not with answers, but with grace. One of the first things he published after his return was a short essay called The Gift of Not Knowing. It was only 800 words, but it went viral within hours. In it, he wrote, "We spend so much of our lives afraid of doubt. But I've come to believe that doubt, when met with honesty and love, is one of the most sacred things we can hold. It keeps us humble. It keeps us searching. And sometimes, it leads us home." That essay struck a chord around the world. People wrote in, sharing stories of uncertainty, about illness, about relationships, about death. Ethan replied to many of them personally, his inbox a tapestry of human complexity. One email stood out. A young woman named Rosa who had grown up in a strict religious household, abandoned her faith, and now found herself yearning for some kind of spiritual language again. Ethan invited her to a small retreat he was organizing, a circle of strangers brought together not to fix each other, but to sit with each other. These retreats became the most meaningful work Ethan had ever done. No cameras. No bios. Just people, teachers, skeptics, poets, engineers, atheists, believers, sharing silence, stories, and simple meals. One night, around a campfire, a man asked, "Do you still believe in God?" Ethan smiled, poking at the embers. "I believe in love," he said. "And I believe that whatever God is, it's closer to love than anything else." By now, the world had stopped calling him just Elon Musk's son. He was Ethan. A writer, a listener, a person who helped others feel less alone in their questions. He still received invitations to conferences and panels, but he chose carefully, always asking himself, is this about ego or about service? Sometimes he said yes. More often, he said no. One day, as he stood watching the ocean roll in at Big Sur, he felt a familiar ache, not of confusion, but of longing. Not for answers, but for deeper connection. He realized something then: this journey of faith, of humanity, of trying to live honestly, it doesn't end. There's no final insight. There's just the practice of waking up each day and trying to be fully here. He took out his notebook and wrote one final line beneath all the pages: "I never found the answer. But I found the question worth living for." And maybe that was the whole point. Ethan stood at the edge of the forest, the path ahead winding through the trees like a ribbon of possibility. The monastery had given him the space to confront his inner turmoil, to question his beliefs, and to find a semblance of peace. But now, as he prepared to re-enter the world, he felt both a sense of trepidation and anticipation. The silence of the mountains had been a balm, but the noise of the world was inescapable. He had spent the past month in seclusion, meditating, reflecting, and engaging in deep conversations with the monks. Each day had brought new insights, new understandings of himself and the world around him. The teachings of the monastery had not provided all the answers, but they had taught him to live with the questions, to embrace uncertainty, and to find meaning in the journey rather than the destination. As he made his way back to civilization, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer the person who had left. The experiences of the past month had transformed him, deepened him, and connected him to something greater than himself. Upon his return, Ethan was greeted with a flurry of messages and invitations. The world had not forgotten him. But he had changed. He no longer sought the spotlight, no longer craved the approval of others. Instead, he sought authenticity, connection, and truth. He declined most of the invitations, choosing instead to spend time with those who mattered most: his family, his friends, and those who had supported him during his journey. He reconnected with old friends, shared meals with his mother, and spent quiet evenings reflecting on the lessons he had learned. One evening, as he sat with his mother in the garden, she looked at him with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've changed, Ethan," she said softly. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I have. And I think it's for the better." His mother reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Just remember, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to be uncertain." Ethan squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. "I know, Mom. I know." In the weeks that followed, Ethan began to share his experiences with others. He wrote essays, gave talks, and participated in discussions about spirituality, purpose, and the human condition. But he did so not from a place of authority, but from a place of humility and shared experience. His words resonated with many. People appreciated his honesty, his vulnerability, and his willingness to question everything, even himself. He became a voice for those who felt lost, for those who were searching for meaning in a world that often seemed devoid of it. But not everyone was receptive. Some criticized him for abandoning his previous pursuits, for stepping away from the limelight. They accused him of being inconsistent, of lacking conviction. But Ethan had learned not to be swayed by the opinions of others. He knew his truth, and that was enough. One day, he received a letter from an old acquaintance. A former colleague from his earlier ventures. The letter was filled with praise for his recent work, but it also contained a subtle criticism. "You found your path," the letter read, "but don't forget where you came from." Ethan pondered the words for a long time. He had not forgotten his past. It had shaped him, molded him, and led him to where he was now. But he had also outgrown it. He had evolved, and he was no longer the person he had been. He replied to the letter, expressing gratitude for the support and acknowledging the validity of the concerns raised. But he also made it clear that he was on a new path, one that was true to himself, and he would not be deterred from it. As the months passed, Ethan continued his journey of self-discovery. He traveled to different parts of the world, seeking out new experiences, meeting new people, and learning from diverse cultures and philosophies. Each encounter added depth to his understanding, each experience broadened his perspective. He visited remote villages in Africa, where he learned about sustainable farming practices and the importance of community. He spent time with indigenous tribes in South America, gaining insight into their spiritual beliefs and connection to the earth. He studied ancient texts in Asia, delving into the wisdom of past civilizations. Through these experiences, Ethan realized that there was no one-size-fits-all answer to life's questions. Each culture, each individual, had their own path, their own truth. And while there were common threads, love, compassion, understanding, there was no universal formula. This realization brought him peace. He no longer felt the need to have all the answers, to solve all the problems. He understood that his role was not to provide solutions, but to ask the right questions, to inspire others to seek their own truths. One evening, as he sat by a campfire with a group of travelers in the deserts of the Middle East, one of them asked him, "What is the meaning of life?" Ethan stared into the flames, the dancing light reflecting in his eyes. He had been asked this question countless times, but this time, he felt no pressure to answer. Instead, he smiled and said, "I think the meaning is in the asking." The group fell silent, contemplating his words. And in that silence, Ethan felt a deep sense of connection, not just to them, but to the world, to the universe, to everything. He had found his place, not in the answers, but in the questions. And that, he realized, was enough. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The ancient temple of Xanadu loomed before Ethan and the night watchers, its weathered stone walls shrouded in an eerie mist. The air was thick with tension, the weight of impending confrontation pressing down on them. Ethan stood at the forefront, his gaze fixed on the temple's entrance, his mind racing with the gravity of the mission ahead. "We've trained for this moment," Sophia said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of concern. "But remember, the void is unpredictable. Stay focused." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. The power of the void had been both a gift and a curse. It had granted him abilities beyond human comprehension, but it also carried a darkness that threatened to consume him. He had learned to harness it, to control it, but the fear of losing himself to its pull lingered. As they approached the temple, the ground beneath their feet trembled, a low rumble echoing from within. The umbral cabal was close. They had to act swiftly. Inside, the temple was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each more foreboding than the last. The walls were adorned with cryptic symbols, their meanings lost to time. The air was thick with the scent of incense and decay, a testament to the temple's long-forgotten purpose. At the heart of the temple, they found the cabal's leader, a figure cloaked in shadows, standing before an altar pulsing with dark energy. The void. It hummed with malevolent intent, its power radiating outward, threatening to engulf everything in its path. "You've come," the figure intoned, its voice a chorus of whispers. "But you're too late. The void is already awakening." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Not if I can help it." With a swift motion, he summoned the void's power, channeling it through his body. The energy surged within him, a torrent of raw force. But as it coursed through him, he felt the familiar tug, the seductive whisper urging him to surrender, to let go. He fought against it, focusing on the task at hand. The cabal's leader raised a hand, summoning tendrils of dark energy to strike. Ethan countered, his movements fluid and precise, each strike infused with the void's power. The battle raged on, a clash of light and darkness, of will and temptation. Ethan's body ached, his mind strained under the weight of the power he wielded. But he pressed on, determined to end this. Finally, with a decisive blow, he struck the cabal's leader, sending the figure sprawling to the ground. The dark energy dissipated, the temple falling silent. Sophia approached, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. "You did it," she said softly. "But at what cost?" Ethan stood over the fallen figure, his chest heaving with exertion. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. The void still pulsed within him, its presence a constant reminder of the battle he fought not just against external foes, but against himself. "We've won," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But the war isn't over." As they left the temple, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land. The world was safe, for now. But Ethan knew that peace was fleeting, and the shadows of the void would always be lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness. He glanced at Sophia, her face set with determination. Together, they would continue the fight, not just against the darkness that threatened the world, but against the darkness within themselves. The journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan had always believed that the most profound journeys were those that led inward. Yet, as he stood at the edge of the forest, gazing into the unknown, he realized that some paths were meant to be walked with others. The world had changed, and so had he. The lessons from the monastery, the battles fought, and the quiet moments of reflection had all converged into a singular truth: connection was the essence of existence. His journey had begun as a quest for personal understanding, but it had evolved into a mission to bridge the divides between people, to foster empathy, and to remind humanity of its shared essence. The Night Watchers, once mere allies in a battle against darkness, had become his family, his anchor in a world that often seemed adrift. Sophia, ever the pragmatist, had been the first to notice the subtle shifts in Ethan's demeanor. "You're different," she remarked one evening as they sat by the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. "Not in a bad way, but there's a calmness about you now." Ethan smiled, the weight of his experiences settling comfortably within him. "I've come to understand that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but but the ability to remain centered amidst it. Their conversations often delved into the complexities of the world, the challenges they faced, and the small victories that brought hope. They spoke of the void, not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a force to be understood and integrated. Balance, Ethan mused, isn't about eliminating the darkness, but about learning to coexist with it. As the months passed, their group grew. People from all walks of life, drawn by the message of unity and understanding, sought refuge and guidance. Ethan welcomed them, not as followers, but as fellow travelers on a shared journey. Together, they built communities that prioritized compassion, collaboration, and consciousness. One such community was established in the heart of a bustling city, a place where technology and tradition coexisted harmoniously. Here, Ethan found himself teaching not just about the dangers of unchecked ambition, but about the beauty of mindful living. Technology, he explained, is a tool. It can connect us, but it can also isolate us. The key is in how we use it. His teachings resonated with many, sparking a movement that spread across continents. People began to question their priorities, their values, and their impact on the world. The shift was subtle at first, but it gained momentum, fueled by the collective desire for a more compassionate and conscious existence. Yet, not everyone embraced the change. There were those who clung to the old ways, resistant to the idea of transformation. They viewed Ethan and his followers as idealists, dreamers detached from reality. But Ethan understood their skepticism. Change was daunting, and fear often masked itself as resistance. In one of his talks, he addressed this very fear. Change isn't about abandoning what we know, he said. It's about evolving, growing, and adapting to the needs of the present without losing sight of our essence. His words sparked debates, discussions, and, at times, heated arguments. But through it all, Ethan remained steadfast in his belief that dialogue was the bridge to understanding. It's okay to disagree, he often said. What's important is that we listen, truly listen, to each other. As the movement gained traction, Ethan found himself invited to speak at international forums, to engage with leaders, thinkers, and changemakers. He spoke not from a place of authority, but from a place of experience. I'm not here to tell you what to do, he would begin. I'm here to share what I've learned, to offer a perspective that might help us all navigate the complexities of our world. His approach was refreshing. He didn't offer solutions or blueprints. Instead, he posed questions, encouraged introspection, and emphasized the importance of collective action. We are all interconnected, he reminded his audiences. Our actions ripple out, affecting not just our immediate surroundings, but the world at large. Despite the challenges and criticisms, Ethan remained committed to his mission. He continued to write, speak, and engage with communities, always emphasizing the importance of empathy, understanding, and shared responsibility. One evening, as he sat overlooking a serene lake, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, he received a message. It was from an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The message was simple, "Thank you." The words brought a tear to his eye. In that moment, he realized that the true measure of his journey wasn't in the accolades or recognition, but in the lives he had touched, the hearts he had opened, and the connections he had fostered. Ethan had set out to understand the world, but in doing so, he had come to understand himself. He had learned that the path to enlightenment wasn't a solitary one. It was a shared journey, a collective effort to navigate the complexities of existence with grace, compassion, and consciousness. And as he stood up, ready to continue his walk along the path, he knew that the journey was far from over. There was still much to learn, much to experience, and much to share. But for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Ethan had always believed that the most profound journeys were those that led inward. Yet, as he stood at the edge of the forest, gazing into the unknown, he realized that some paths were meant to be walked with others. The world had changed, and so had he. The lessons from the monastery, the battles fought, and the quiet moments of reflection had all converged into a singular truth: connection was the essence of existence. His journey had begun as a quest for personal understanding, but it had evolved into a mission to bridge the divides between people, to foster empathy, and to remind humanity of its shared essence. The Night Watchers, once mere allies in a battle against darkness, had become his family, his anchor in a world that often seemed adrift. Sophia, ever the pragmatist, had been the first to notice the subtle shifts in Ethan's demeanor. "You're different," she remarked one evening as they sat by the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. "Not in a bad way, but there's a calmness about you now." Ethan smiled, the weight of his experiences settling comfortably within him. "I've come to understand that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the ability to remain centered amidst it." Their conversations often delved into the complexities of the world, the challenges they faced, and the small victories that brought hope. They spoke of the void, not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a force to be understood and integrated. Balance, Ethan mused, isn't about eliminating the darkness, but about learning to coexist with it. As the months passed, their group grew. People from all walks of life, drawn by the message of unity and understanding, sought refuge and guidance. Ethan welcomed them, not as followers, but as fellow travelers on a shared journey. Together, they built communities that prioritized compassion, collaboration, and consciousness. One such community was established in the heart of a bustling city, a place where technology and tradition coexisted harmoniously. Here, Ethan found himself teaching not just about the dangers of unchecked ambition, but about the beauty of mindful living. Technology, he explained, is a tool. It can connect us, but it can also isolate us. The key is in how we use it. His teachings resonated with many, sparking a movement that spread across continents. People began to question their priorities, their values, and their impact on the world. The shift was subtle at first, but it gained momentum, fueled by the collective desire for a more compassionate and conscious existence. Yet, not everyone embraced the change. There were those who clung to the old ways, resistant to the idea of transformation. They viewed Ethan and his followers as idealists, dreamers detached from reality. But Ethan understood their skepticism. Change was daunting, and fear often masked itself as resistance. In one of his talks, he addressed this very fear. "Change isn't about abandoning what we know," he said. "It's about evolving, growing, and adapting to the needs of the present without losing sight of our essence." His words sparked debates, discussions, and, at times, heated arguments. But through it all, Ethan remained steadfast in his belief that dialogue was the bridge to understanding. "It's okay to disagree," he often said. "What's important is that we listen, truly listen, to each other." As the movement gained traction, Ethan found himself invited to speak at international forums, to engage with leaders, thinkers, and changemakers. He spoke not from a place of authority, but from a place of experience. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," he would begin. "I'm here to share what I've learned, to offer a perspective that might help us all navigate the complexities of our world." His approach was refreshing. He didn't offer solutions or blueprints. Instead, he posed questions, encouraged introspection, and emphasized the importance of collective action. "We are all interconnected," he reminded his audiences. "Our actions ripple out, affecting not just our immediate surroundings, but the world at large." Despite the challenges and criticisms, Ethan remained committed to his mission. He continued to write, speak, and engage with communities, always emphasizing the importance of empathy, understanding, and shared responsibility. One evening, as he sat overlooking a serene lake, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, he received a message. It was from an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The message was simple: "Thank you." The words brought a tear to his eye. In that moment, he realized that the true measure of his journey wasn't in the accolades or recognition, but in the lives he had touched, the hearts he had opened, and the connections he had fostered. Ethan had set out to understand the world, but in doing so, he had come to understand himself. He had learned that the path to enlightenment wasn't a solitary one. It was a shared journey, a collective effort to navigate the complexities of existence with grace, compassion, and consciousness. And as he stood up, ready to continue his walk along the path, he knew that the journey was far from over. There was still much to learn, much to experience, and much to share. But for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The world had changed. Ethan could feel it in the air, in the way people moved through their lives, in the subtle shifts of energy that rippled across the land. The battle against the void had been won, but the war was far from over. The darkness had not been vanquished, it had merely retreated, biding its time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Ethan stood on the balcony of the sanctuary, gazing out over the sprawling city below. The streets were bustling with activity, a testament to the resilience of humanity. Yet, beneath the surface, he sensed an undercurrent of unease. People were going about their daily lives, but their eyes betrayed a lingering fear, a fear of the unknown, of what might come next. Sophia joined him, her presence a comforting anchor in the midst of his turmoil. "You're thinking about the future again," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of understanding. Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "I can't shake the feeling that something is coming, something we aren't prepared for." Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "We've faced the darkness before. Together, we'll face whatever comes next." But Ethan wasn't so sure. The void had been a tangible enemy, something they could fight against. But what if the next threat was more insidious, more subtle? What if it was already among them, hiding in plain sight? His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the night watchers. They had gathered in the central hall, their faces grim, their eyes filled with determination. Ethan knew that look, it was the same look they had worn before every battle, every confrontation with the unknown. "What's happened?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the unease churning within him. Sophia stepped forward, her expression serious. "We've received reports from across the globe. Unexplained phenomena, disturbances in the natural order, whispers of a new force rising in the shadows." Ethan's heart sank. The void had been a force of destruction, but this was something different. Something more elusive. "We need to investigate," he said, his voice firm. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before it consumes us." The night watchers nodded in agreement, their resolve unwavering. They had faced the darkness before, and they would do so again. Over the following weeks, Ethan and the night watchers traveled to the farthest corners of the earth, seeking answers, uncovering fragments of a mystery that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. They encountered ancient texts, cryptic symbols, and remnants of civilizations long forgotten, all pointing to a force older than the void itself. In the depths of a hidden temple beneath the sands of the desert, they uncovered a prophecy, its words etched into the stone walls. "When the stars align and the moon turns red, the ancient ones shall awaken. The balance shall tip, and the world shall tremble." Ethan stood before the prophecy, his mind racing. The stars were aligning, the moon was turning red, and the ancient ones, who were they? And what did their awakening mean for the world? "We need to prepare," he said, his voice laced with urgency. "The prophecy speaks of a tipping of the balance. If the ancient ones awaken, we may not be able to stop them." Sophia nodded, her expression mirroring his concern. "But how do we prepare for something we don't understand?" Ethan turned to the night watchers, his gaze steady. "We do what we've always done. We fight. We learn. We adapt." But deep down, he knew that this time, the battle would be different. The enemy was not something they could see, something they could fight with swords and spells. This enemy was insidious, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the days passed, the signs became more apparent. The moon grew redder each night, the stars aligned in patterns that defied explanation, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Ethan gathered the night watchers once more, their faces grim, their hearts heavy with the weight of what was to come. We stand on the precipice, he said, his voice filled with resolve. The ancient ones are awakening. The balance is tipping. But we will not stand idly by. We will face this threat head-on, as we have always done. Sophia stepped forward, her eyes meeting Ethan's. Together, she said, her voice unwavering. Together, Ethan echoed. And so, they prepared. They studied ancient texts, consulted with mystics and scholars, and trained tirelessly for the battles ahead. They knew that the coming storm would test them in ways they could not yet comprehend, but they were ready. They had to be. The world was changing, and with it, the forces that governed it. But Ethan and the night watchers would stand firm, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The days that followed the discovery of the ancient prophecy were filled with a sense of urgency. Ethan and the night watchers delved deeper into their research, seeking any clue that might shed light on the identity of the ancient ones, and the nature of the impending threat. They consulted scholars, mystics, and sages from all corners of the world, piecing together fragments of knowledge that spanned centuries. One evening, as the group gathered in the sanctuary, Sophia presented a revelation. "I have found a reference," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. An ancient text speaks of beings known as the Elder Ones, entities of immense power who once shaped the very fabric of reality. According to the text, they were sealed away eons ago to prevent them from unbalancing the world. Ethan's heart raced. Could these be the same beings mentioned in the prophecy? "It's possible," Sophia replied. The descriptions align. The Elder Ones were said to awaken when the cosmic balance was disturbed, when the forces of light and darkness were no longer in harmony. The implications were staggering. If the Elder Ones were indeed awakening, it meant that the very foundation of reality was at risk. The balance that had been maintained for millennia was in jeopardy. "We must act swiftly," Ethan declared. "We cannot allow the Elder Ones to return and wreak havoc upon the world." The night watchers set out to locate the seals that bound the Elder Ones, hoping to reinforce them before the awakening could occur. Their journey took them to remote temples, hidden caverns, and forgotten ruins, each location more perilous than the last. Along the way, they encountered remnants of the Elder One's influence, ancient guardians, cryptic symbols, and remnants of forgotten civilizations. In one such temple, deep within a jungle shrouded in mist, they discovered a seal inscribed with intricate runes. As Ethan approached, a surge of energy pulsed through the air, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. "It's weakening," he murmured, his brow furrowed in concern. "We must strengthen it before it's too late." Working together, the night watchers chanted incantations, invoking protective spells, and performing rituals to reinforce the seal. Hours passed, and the tremors subsided. The seal was secure, for now. But Ethan knew that this was only one of many. There were others, scattered across the globe, each holding back the tide of chaos. Time was running out. As they continued their quest, Ethan's thoughts often turned inward. The journey had changed him. He had once sought power, knowledge, and understanding. Now, he sought harmony. He had come to realize that true strength lay not in domination, but in balance. The Elder Ones represented an extreme, a force that sought to impose order without compassion. The Void, too, had been an embodiment of imbalance, a force that consumed without purpose. In his heart, Ethan knew that the key to preventing the awakening of the Elder Ones lay in restoring balance, not just to the world, but to the hearts of its inhabitants. Fear, greed, and hatred had tipped the scales. Only through unity, compassion, and understanding could the balance be restored. One night, as the group camped beneath a canopy of stars, Ethan shared his thoughts with Sophia. "We cannot fight this battle alone," he said. "We must awaken the hearts of the people, inspire them to seek balance within themselves." Sophia nodded. "But how do we reach them? How do we make them see?" Ethan gazed up at the stars, a sense of clarity washing over him. "We lead by example. We show them the way through our actions, our words, and our compassion. We create ripples of change, and those ripples will grow into waves. With renewed determination, the Night Watchers expanded their efforts. They traveled to villages, cities, and towns, sharing their message of balance and unity. They taught meditation, mindfulness, and conflict resolution. They encouraged communities to come together, to listen, and to understand. Slowly but surely, the message began to take root. People started to change. They began to value cooperation over competition, understanding over judgment, and compassion over indifference. The world, once on the brink of chaos, began to heal. But even as the people embraced the path of balance, the Elder Ones stirred. Their awakening was imminent. The seals were weakening, and the cosmic balance hung by a thread. Ethan and the Night Watchers knew that the final confrontation was approaching. They had prepared as best as they could, but the true test would come when they faced the Elder Ones themselves. As they gathered one last time before the final journey, Ethan addressed the group. "We have done all we can. We have sought knowledge, strengthened the seals, and inspired the people. Now, we face the ultimate challenge. But I have faith in us. I have faith in the balance we have cultivated." Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. "We are ready." With that, they set out for the final seal, the heart of the storm. The path was treacherous, fraught with dangers both physical and metaphysical. But they pressed on, driven by their purpose. At the heart of an ancient mountain, they found the final seal. It pulsed with dark energy, its power threatening to consume everything in its vicinity. Ethan stepped forward, his heart steady. "This is it," he said. "The final test." Together, the Night Watchers chanted the ancient incantations, their voices harmonizing in a powerful symphony. The ground shook, and the air crackled with energy. The seal resisted, but their combined strength was greater. With a final surge of power, the seal was reinforced. The dark energy dissipated, and the mountain fell silent. The Elder Ones had been sealed once more. But Ethan knew that the battle was not over. The forces of imbalance would always seek to tip the scales. It was up to each individual to maintain the balance within themselves. As they descended the mountain, Ethan looked to the horizon. The world was healing, but the journey was ongoing. Balance was not a destination, it was a continuous process. And so, the Night Watchers continued their mission, not as warriors, but as guides, helping others find their path to balance and harmony. The awakening had been averted, but the true awakening was just beginning. The world had been quiet for several weeks, a fragile peace settling over the lands. Ethan and the Night Watchers had returned to their sanctuary, their mission seemingly complete. The Elder Ones had been sealed, the balance restored. Yet, a lingering unease gnawed at Ethan's soul. The prophecy had spoken of a tipping of the scales, a moment when the world would tremble. He couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Ethan gathered the Night Watchers. Their faces were weary, but their spirits remained steadfast. "We've done what we can," Ethan began, his voice steady. "But I fear that our actions have only delayed the inevitable. The prophecy speaks of a veil, a shadow that will descend upon the world. I believe this veil is not a mere metaphor. It is a force, a presence that we have yet to understand." Sophia, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "A force? What do you mean?" Ethan's gaze was distant, as if peering into realms unseen. "I believe the veil is a manifestation of the imbalance we have yet to address. The Elder Ones were a symptom, not the cause. The true source of the disturbance lies within us." The group fell silent, the weight of Ethan's words settling over them like a heavy fog. "We must seek out this veil," Ethan continued. "Not to fight it, but to understand it. Only then can we hope to restore true balance." The Night Watchers nodded in agreement, their resolve hardening. They had faced darkness before, but this was different. This was a journey into the unknown. Their quest led them to ancient ruins, forgotten temples, and hidden sanctuaries. They encountered cryptic symbols, enigmatic guardians, and remnants of civilizations long past. Each clue brought them closer to understanding the nature of the veil. In a secluded valley, they discovered a temple dedicated to an unknown deity. Its walls were adorned with intricate carvings depicting celestial alignments, cosmic events, and the interplay of light and shadow. At the center of the temple stood a massive stone door, inscribed with a single word, equilibrium. Ethan approached the door, his fingers tracing the ancient symbols. "This is it," he murmured. "The key to understanding the veil." With a deep breath, he placed his hand upon the door. A surge of energy coursed through him, and the door slowly creaked open, revealing a chamber bathed in ethereal light. Inside, they found a pool of water, its surface perfectly still. Above it, a mirror-like reflection of the sky, unmarred by clouds or stars. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been suspended. "This is the veil," Ethan whispered. "A reflection of our world, untouched by time or change." Sophia stepped forward, her reflection rippling in the water. "But why? Why is it here?" Ethan's expression was grim. "The veil is a mirror. It reflects our inner turmoil, our fears, our desires. It exists because we have allowed imbalance to fester within ourselves." The group stood in silence, contemplating the enormity of their discovery. "We must confront the veil," Ethan said finally. "Not to destroy it, but to integrate it. Only then can we restore true balance." They spent days within the temple, meditating, reflecting, and seeking understanding. Slowly, they came to realize that the veil was not an external force to be vanquished, but an internal aspect to be embraced. As they left the temple, the sky above them seemed clearer, the air lighter. The world had not changed, but they had. They had faced the darkness within themselves and emerged stronger for it. Ethan looked to his companions, a sense of peace settling over him. "The journey is never truly over," he said. "But we walk it together, in balance and harmony." And so, the night watchers continued their mission, not as warriors, but as guides, helping others find their path to balance and harmony. The veil had been lifted, not through force, but through understanding. The world was healing, one soul at a time. The stillness after the veil's revelation was deceiving. Though Ethan and the night watchers had confronted their own inner darkness and gained newfound clarity, the ripples of imbalance still whispered through the fabric of the world. Sometimes, the past returns not as a shadow but as a storm, dragging unresolved histories into the present. For Ethan, the echoes of his own past began to stir, unearthing memories and secrets long buried beneath years of ambition, isolation, and doubt. It started with a letter, an unexpected message delivered to the sanctuary by a weathered courier from Silicon Valley, the place Ethan once called home. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the signature was unmistakable, from a woman named Caroline, a figure from his childhood who had vanished years ago without a trace. Her words were cryptic but urgent, hinting at truths that could change everything Ethan believed about his family and himself. The message spoke of a hidden chapter in his father's life, Elon Musk's life, that had never been public. Caroline claimed she possessed evidence of Elon's secret experiments on human consciousness, endeavors that blurred the lines between technology and spirituality. She warned that these experiments, carried out decades ago, had triggered the disturbances they now faced, awakening forces beyond human understanding. Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit room, the letter trembling in his hands. He had spent years wrestling with his father's legacy, the weight of genius and expectation shadowing every step. Now, this message threatened to rewrite that narrative entirely. Could it be true? Had his father's quest for innovation inadvertently torn at the very fabric of reality? Driven by a mixture of skepticism and desperation, Ethan called a private meeting with Sophia and the most trusted night watchers. They pored over the letter, debating its authenticity and implications. Sophia's calm voice cut through the tension, if even half of this is true, it means we're dealing not just with cosmic forces but with human hubris, the dangerous overreach of technology into realms meant to remain untouched. The group decided to seek Caroline out, hoping she could shed light on these hidden truths. Their journey took them back to California, to a secluded research facility deep within the hills, long abandoned and swallowed by overgrowth. The facility was rumored to have been part of a clandestine project, a laboratory where the boundaries between mind and machine were tested and pushed beyond comprehension. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of rusting metal. Broken monitors flickered faintly, and scattered files told tales of neural experiments, consciousness transfer, and attempts to bridge human minds with artificial intelligence. Yet, amid the sterile technology, there was something deeply unsettling, something that felt less scientific and more otherworldly. As they explored, a figure emerged from the shadows, Caroline herself, aged but sharp-eyed, her presence commanding yet haunted. She revealed how she had been a researcher at the facility, working alongside Elon in secret projects that sought to unlock the divine spark within human consciousness through technology. Their aim was noble, to elevate humanity, to transcend physical limits, but something went terribly wrong. Caroline explained that during one critical experiment, they had inadvertently pierced the veil separating reality from a parallel dimension, a realm inhabited by the Elder Ones and other cosmic entities. This breach had weakened the seals Ethan and his team fought so hard to restore. Worse, some of the technology had fused with the fabric of the human mind, creating conduits through which the ancient forces could influence the world. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Ethan. His father's genius was no longer just a source of pride or frustration but a catalyst that had set in motion the very dangers threatening existence itself. Yet Caroline's final words offered a sliver of hope: there is a way to undo the damage. But it requires sacrifice, a true understanding of balance between technology and spirit. Ethan knew their journey had only just begun. The future would demand more than courage and strength. It would call for humility, for the courage to confront his own legacy and the consequences of humanity's relentless pursuit of progress. Back at the sanctuary, as night deepened, Ethan stood beneath the stars, the echoes of his past mingling with the promise of what was yet to come. The veil was lifting, but the path ahead was fraught with shadows. Still, he felt ready. For the first time, he understood that to save the world, he had to save himself first. And with that, the Night Watchers prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, determined to restore not just balance to the world, but to the soul of humanity itself. The letter from Caroline had opened a fissure in Ethan's world, and the revelation about his father's secret experiments weighed heavily on his mind as he returned to the sanctuary with Sophia and the Night Watchers. The research facility deep in California's hills had shown them how far humanity's quest for transcendence had pushed boundaries, blurring the line between science and spirituality. Yet, it also revealed the price paid, an irreversible tear in reality that unleashed forces far beyond human control. Back at the sanctuary, the team gathered in the main hall beneath vaulted ceilings etched with symbols of balance and harmony. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows, a visual reminder of the duality they sought to overcome. Ethan addressed the group, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. We have to confront the consequences of those experiments. This is no longer just about fighting external enemies, the greatest battle is within us and our own legacy. Sophia nodded. Caroline mentioned sacrifice and balance. We must understand what that truly means. If technology and spirit are at odds, we need to find a way to reconcile them. The Night Watchers deliberated late into the night, pondering ways to repair the damage and prevent further breaches. They concluded their best course was to seek an ancient artifact rumored to possess the power to harmonize conflicting energies, the Heart of Ether. Said to be hidden within the depths of a remote mountain monastery, the artifact was a relic from a civilization that had once mastered the delicate interplay between technology and mysticism. Before departing, Ethan spent a quiet moment alone in the meditation chamber. The weight of his father's legacy pressed upon him, a blend of awe, frustration, and responsibility. Elon Musk's mind had reached for the stars, yet in doing so, it had unknowingly loosened the fabric that held reality together. Ethan's resolve hardened. He would not let this legacy destroy everything he cared for. To save the world, he must embrace both the man who came before him and the man he wished to become. The journey to the monastery was grueling, marked by steep cliffs, treacherous weather, and a silence so profound it seemed to hold its own secrets. Yet, as they approached the ancient stone gates, Ethan felt an unexpected calm, a reassurance that they were on the right path. The monks who greeted them were custodians of knowledge and balance, living embodiments of the harmony Ethan sought. Their leader, a serene woman named May, welcomed the night watchers and shared stories of the heart of ether, a crystalline gem capable of channeling cosmic energies to heal rifts between worlds. Balance is not a static state, May explained, her eyes reflecting wisdom earned over decades. It is a dance between forces, an ongoing process of giving and receiving, of light and shadow. The heart can guide you, but you must first understand what balance means in your own hearts. Over several days, Ethan and his companions underwent rituals designed to attune their minds and spirits to the cosmic rhythms. They meditated beneath starlit skies, practiced ancient breathing techniques, and shared stories that wove together science, spirituality, and personal struggle. Ethan found himself confronting not only his father's shadow but his own fears and ambitions. In this crucible of reflection, he glimpsed the true cost of imbalance, isolation, arrogance, and loss. Yet he also saw the seeds of healing, compassion, humility, and the courage to change. Finally, guided by May, they entered the sacred chamber where the heart of ether rested on an altar of shimmering stone. The gem pulsed gently, radiating a light both brilliant and soothing. Ethan reached out, feeling warmth spread through his fingers and up his arm. In that moment, visions flooded his mind, scenes of past experiments, the breach between dimensions, and the fragile thread holding reality together. But alongside these came images of unity, humans and machines coexisting, light and shadow entwined, a world healed through understanding. The heart whispered a truth, that technology must serve the spirit, not dominate it, that progress without balance breeds destruction, that salvation lay in integration, not opposition. Ethan knew the path forward would be perilous. Repairing the damage meant facing the darkest corners of both the world and himself. It required forging alliances with former enemies, embracing uncertainty, and relinquishing control. As they prepared to leave, May offered a final piece of guidance: remember, the greatest balance is found within. Carry this truth into every choice you make. The descent from the monastery was lighter, infused with hope tempered by realism. The night watchers returned with renewed purpose, to heal the breach, to reconcile technology and spirit, and to lead humanity toward a future where innovation and wisdom walked hand in hand. But even as they moved forward, shadows lurked. Forces awakened by the breach, and the lingering influence of the Elder Ones, threatened to unravel their efforts. Ethan sensed the crossroads of fate approaching, the moment when choices made would determine the survival or destruction of all. Standing at the edge of this precipice, Ethan understood that the true test was yet to come. The future was not written, it was forged by the will to balance power with compassion, knowledge with humility. And in that realization, he found strength not just from the legacy of a brilliant father, but from the courage to carve his own path through the unknown. The sanctuary's quiet hum was shattered as urgent messages flooded in. Ethan, Sophia, and the night watchers had barely returned from the monastery when reports of strange phenomena began to surface worldwide. Unexplained power outages, sudden distortions in time perception, and bizarre electromagnetic surges hinted that the dimensional breach was worsening. The veil they had once glimpsed was growing thinner, and shadows spilled forth more freely. Ethan stood before the glowing maps tracking anomalies, his mind racing. This isn't just a local disturbance. It's global, and escalating fast. His voice carried the weight of looming crisis. Sophia stepped forward. We need to act quickly. If the breach widens, entire cities could fall into chaos, or worse. The night watchers mobilized immediately, coordinating with scientists, mystics, and global leaders. Their mission, to stabilize the breach and protect the innocent. Yet despite their efforts, the storm grew stronger. Amid the chaos, Ethan received a mysterious invitation, an encrypted message from an enigmatic figure known only as the Oracle. The message promised knowledge vital to closing the breach but demanded a risky meeting at a remote location, a place rumored to exist between worlds. Faced with little choice, Ethan and a small team set out into the heart of the storm. The journey was perilous, reality itself seemed to warp, twisting paths and distorting time. As they crossed into the liminal space, Ethan felt the veil thin to a whisper, the boundary between dimensions shimmering like a fragile veil in a tempest. There, the Oracle awaited, a being neither fully human nor fully spectral, eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. "You seek to mend what was broken," the Oracle intoned. "But to do so, you must first understand the true nature of the balance you pursue. It is not merely the absence of conflict, but the embrace of paradox." The Oracle revealed that the Elder Ones were but one manifestation of imbalance, that the breach had unleashed countless entities born from human fear, ambition, and despair. The only way to restore harmony was to confront these shadows within themselves and the world. Ethan listened, absorbing the enormity of their task. He realized that technology, spirituality, human emotion, all were threads woven into the same tapestry. To heal one, they must heal all. Armed with the Oracle's insight, the Night Watchers returned to the sanctuary, preparing for the battle ahead. They developed a plan to harness the Heart of Ether's power combined with cutting-edge technology to seal the breach permanently. As the storm gathered, threatening to tear the world apart, Ethan stood with his comrades, ready to face the darkness. Not just around them, but within themselves. The final confrontation loomed, a crucible that would test every lesson learned, every ounce of courage. In the eye of the gathering storm, hope flickered, a fragile light in the encroaching shadows. And with that light, Ethan vowed to protect the balance, no matter the cost. The sanctuary was transformed into a war room. Monitors lined the walls, displaying live feeds of anomalies erupting across the globe, cities flickering into darkness, skies bleeding unnatural hues, reality bending at its seams. Ethan stood at the center, flanked by Sophia and the Night Watchers, their faces set with grim determination. The time for words had passed, now was the moment for action. The plan was audacious. Using the Heart of Ether as the linchpin, combined with advanced technology from Elon Musk's hidden archives unearthed by Caroline, they would attempt to seal the breach. But the ritual required them to stand at the very nexus where realities collided, the epicenter of the dimensional tear located beneath an abandoned launch facility in the Nevada desert. As the team prepared, Ethan's mind drifted to his father's legacy, a legacy of genius and peril. Elon's relentless pursuit of the unknown had sparked this crisis, but it also held the key to its resolution. The fusion of human will, technological innovation, and spiritual insight was their only hope. They arrived at the desolate site under a turbulent sky. The air buzzed with energy, thick with the tension of two worlds converging. The breach yawned before them like a living wound, swirling with dark tendrils and shimmering light. Ethan could feel the pull, an eerie blend of fear and fascination. Sophia secured the Heart of Ether in a specialized device designed to channel its power. The Night Watchers formed a protective circle, chanting ancient incantations taught by May, weaving spiritual energy into a lattice of balance. Suddenly, the breach roared, spewing forth manifestations of shadow and light, creatures twisted by the conflict between worlds. They surged toward the group, embodiments of humanity's fears and ambitions unleashed. The battle was fierce. Ethan and his team fought with every ounce of strength, their resolve tested by the physical and metaphysical assaults. In the midst of chaos, Ethan confronted a shadowy figure resembling his father, an echo of Elon's ambition distorted by the breach's energy. The apparition spoke in a voice both familiar and alien, "You cannot undo what I began. Progress demands sacrifice." Ethan stood firm. "Progress without balance is destruction. I choose a different path, one of harmony." Channeling the Heart of Ether, Ethan reached into the breach, feeling the searing pain of intertwined realities. The device hummed, pulsing brighter with each heartbeat, until a wave of radiant energy washed over the site, sealing cracks and banishing shadows. As the breach closed, silence fell, a heavy, profound stillness. The storm subsided, stars re-emerged, and the world sighed with relief. Exhausted but victorious, Ethan looked to his comrades. They had faced the darkness both outside and within, emerging transformed. The legacy of ambition had been tempered by wisdom, the veil lifted not by force, but by understanding. This was not the end, but a new beginning. The balance was fragile, but now held in hands wiser and hearts steadier. Ethan whispered to the night sky, "We are the guardians of tomorrow." And with that, the future awaited, bright, uncertain, but alive with possibility. The first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the sanctuary. After the long night of chaos and confrontation, the world seemed to breathe anew. Ethan stood on the terrace, gazing out at the awakening landscape, a symbol of rebirth and hope. The breach was sealed, the elder ones banished, and the shadows receding into memory. Yet, the true victory lay not just in triumph over darkness but in the lessons learned along the way. The sanctuary's halls buzzed with quiet activity. The night watchers moved with renewed purpose, tending to those affected by the storm, rebuilding bridges between fractured communities, and sharing the wisdom born from their trials. Sophia joined Ethan, her eyes reflecting the same mix of relief and determination. "We did more than close a breach," she said softly. "We opened a path, for understanding, for healing. Technology and spirit don't have to be enemies." Ethan nodded. "It was a journey inward as much as outward. Facing the legacy of my father, confronting the darkness within myself. It's what made this possible." Caroline arrived that morning, her presence a reminder of the complicated past they had unraveled and the future they would build together. She carried with her new research, promising ways to ensure the balance would be maintained through mindful innovation and respect for the unknown. The team gathered for a final ceremony. A blend of ancient ritual and modern symbolism. They placed the heart of Ether at the sanctuary's center, a beacon of harmony and vigilance. Ethan addressed the assembly, his voice carrying the weight of experience and hope. "Life is unpredictable, full of shadows and light. But love, wisdom, and balance will always guide us forward. Our journey is far from over, but together, we can face whatever comes." Outside, the world blossomed under the new dawn, the air fresh with possibility. Children laughed, communities rebuilt, and the stars shone with quiet brilliance, reminders that even after the darkest night, light returns. Ethan smiled, feeling the profound truth of those words. The veil had lifted, not just from the world, but from their hearts. This was the new beginning they had fought for, a future where technology served humanity, spirit inspired innovation, and balance was the guiding star. The story of Elon Musk's son on God was no longer just a tale of conflict and mystery. It was a testament to resilience, growth, and the enduring power of hope. And as the sun climbed higher, Ethan knew one thing for certain: life, with all its surprises, would always lead the way. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?